This is week 4 of our summer message series called Summer School. I don't know if any of you had to go to summer school, but one summer I had to go to summer school. And let me tell you this, it was boring. So to try to make this series a bit more fun, I insisted that we include the fun coconut man in the logo. So if this has been boring, I hope this has helped. If you're just joining us, welcome. What are we doing in this series? Well, we're taking a closer look at the Creed so that we can understand it better, so that we can see what it has to teach us about our lives, and so that we can live our faith with greater intelligence and greater intention. Lest you accuse me of plagiarism, I should note that, this is the footnote, I am borrowing heavily from this book by Bishop Barron called What Christians Believe. So if I say anything that happens to be particularly wise or insightful, you can give me the credit, but it's probably from here. Before we get to the meat of today's topic, I want to give a preview of a letter that registered parishioners will be receiving in the mail in the days ahead. It is our summer appeal. It's safe to say that none of us were here when St. Bridget Church was built in 1881. And as I look out at the congregation today, I think there's only a few of us who were here when Our Lady of Fatima Church was built in 1956. We've got Mr. John Wilson, who just turned 95, and I think the Marshes were here, but they were little kids at the time. And is that it? Am I missing anybody? Any other founders here? Okay, so for the rest of us, so 3 of you were here to build the church, but for the rest of us, both of our churches are gifts that we have received. And to preserve these gifts, we have to make investments in them today. I'd rather talk about ministry more than I'd like to talk about buildings, but the fact of the matter is this. Most of our ministry takes place in buildings, 2 of which, St. Bridget and Our Lady of Fatima, are sacred spaces. If you own a home, you know that buildings cost money and that they require ongoing investment. And the same is true for our buildings, especially our churches that are older than many of us. I'm going to lift up 3 kind of emergency items now. It was originally 2, but I'm going to up it to 3. So the first 2 items are emergency items that we need to address at St. Bridget. The first is we desperately need a new fire escape. If, God forbid, we had a fire and you survived the fire, you might not survive the fire escape. So, we have to get a new fire escape, and I'm pleased to say that the fabrication of the new fire escape is complete and it should be installed this week. I fully believe that it will be the most beautiful fire escape in all of Maynard. I was told yesterday that the previous fire escape lasted 32 years, and the people that are constructing this one say it'll last about 40. It'll be steel, it'll be coated in a black powder coat, and it'll be very nice. The cost is about $47,000. Okay, second emergency item at St. Bridget, and this didn't become clear until our appeal letter had already gone to print, so it's not in here. We critically need new fire doors and a new frame for those doors at the Percival Street entrance at St. Bridget. We've been hoping to deal with that a little later in the future, but it has become to a critical point that we desperately need to address now. We're still understanding the scope of the project, but it'll be in excess of $10,000 and more if we have to address some structural issues at the same time. And then there's a third that you can probably notice what's going on, the air conditioning, or maybe the lack thereof. So we're trying to understand the scope here. We've spent a bunch of money and time. We have a kind of a quote for $7,700, but we're trying to understand, because we have some other issues with our, it came back on. Maybe it's a fake. So the AC needs a lot of work too. I don't know how much that's going to be, but suffice it to say, probably more than $10,000. Okay, so to wrap it up, to invest in our parish home, I would like to invite you to join me in making a special gift to our summer appeal. And I'm just going to put this out there. If you're in a position to fund one of these projects in its entirety, I would love to talk to you. You can simply grab me or Maureen after Mass. Thank you. Well, it's cool in here. When I was in high school preparing for confirmation, one of the steps of our confirmation process at the time was we had to meet with a member of the confirmation team for kind of like an interview where they asked questions. I don't remember any of the questions that they asked except for one, and the question was this. They said, "Who is the Holy Spirit?" And don't say the third person of the Most Holy Trinity. I don't remember how I answered, but I must have passed because I got confirmed. Upon reflection, though, I think that the point of that question was to stress that the Holy Spirit is someone that we should have a relationship with. And the Holy Spirit is the subject of the section of the Creed that we are looking at today. This section of the Creed begins, and we will say these words in just a few minutes. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life. The Holy Spirit is, I think it's safe to say, the most overlooked member of the Trinity. But we need to be clear. The Holy Spirit is not a what, but a who. Someone said to me after Mass yesterday, I never understood what the Holy Spirit is. And I said, no. Who the Holy Spirit is. And to emphasize the divinity of the Holy Spirit, the Creed calls him Lord. And while the Holy Spirit is eternal with the Father and the Son, it almost seems like the Holy Spirit takes a back seat until Pentecost when he descends on St. Mary and the apostles. In the early church, the life-giving power of the Holy Spirit was especially clear, leading to explosive growth. But the work of the Holy Spirit wasn't limited to those first 300 years of the life of the church. The Holy Spirit is active today. He guides, he bears witness, he prays, he teaches, he speaks, he converts, he lifts up, he inspires, and he directs. So in our prayer, at least from time to time, we have to make it a point to speak to deal with, and to pray to the Holy Spirit. Because the more we do that, the more receptive we become to receiving his inspirations. Continuing to speak of the Holy Spirit, the Creed continues. Who proceeds from the Father and the Son, who with the Father and the Son is adored and glorified. One way that we can think of the Holy Spirit proceeding from the Father and the Son is to consider something which is shared between the Father and the Son, and that is love. And I want you to think of the Holy Spirit as being that love which unites the Father and the Son. Next, the Creed says that the Holy Spirit has spoken through the prophets. As has been true throughout salvation history, when we are in tune with the Holy Spirit and the Holy Spirit lives in us, we can speak prophetically. When we think of prophecy, we might think of simply foretelling the future. And it's true, sometimes prophecy does foretell the future. But this only happens because the prophet sees things from God's perspective and is able to evaluate them according to God's purposes. To be a true prophet, you have to be in tune with the Holy Spirit, and you have to be intent upon doing His will, which, I might say, is the entire goal of the Christian life. In our gospel today, we see Peter teach us what's necessary for the Holy Spirit to come fully alive in us. The apostles are in a boat, and they're a few miles offshore, being tossed about by the waves. We read, "During the fourth watch of the night, he came toward them walking on the sea." The fourth watch means it's after 3 a.m., which is the darkest part of the night, which makes sense that that's when Jesus would come, because Jesus shines a light in our darkness. The apostles are terrified. They think that they're seeing a ghost. And again, Peter, who's going to teach us what's needed for the Holy Spirit to come more alive in us, calls out to Jesus. He says, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Why do you think he says that? Perhaps it's because he was learning to listen to that tiny whispering sound that we heard about in the first reading. The Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit who speaks in those quiet whisperings of the heart. Often when we hear this voice, we experience it as a kind of a pull that's hard to put into words. But recognizing the prompting, Peter calls out to Jesus. And then Jesus extends his hand to Peter, and with a look of expectant love, he says, "Come." And it's incredible. Peter gets out of the boat, and he begins to walk on the water toward Jesus. The things that we can do when we let the Holy Spirit come alive in us are incredible. Things that are beyond our imagination. Even if Jesus invites us to do something daunting, we don't need to be afraid, though, because God always gives us the grace that we need to do the things that He has called us to do. God will never call us to do something and then not give us the grace that we need to do it. Peter, however, at least at this point, doubted this. But when he saw how strong the wind was, he became frightened. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." If Jesus called Peter onto the water, Jesus would make sure that Peter could walk on the water. But distracted by the wind, Peter stopped listening to that voice of the Holy Spirit within. Thankfully, though, that experience of sinking shook him back to his senses, and he cried out to Jesus, "Lord, save me." And then immediately, Jesus stretched out his hand, caught Peter, and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Friends, apart from God, we can do nothing. But with God, filled with the Holy Spirit, incredible things are possible. It's unlikely that any of us will ever hear Jesus speak to us on the waves in a stormy night. But it is certain that Jesus beckons to us amidst the many storms that we face in our lives. And maybe Jesus is asking you to trust Him with something right now. So, where in your life do you need to listen more attentively to and trust in the Holy Spirit?